Hello everybody, my name is Manuel and welcome to another Eternal Contenders video series. Today I'm gonna talk about another deck that I haven't covered yet that is fairly well known. Elysian Midrange. The deck is, I would say, sort of like a maybe tier 2 ladder deck or something, but the deck is reasonably popular and has been around for a while, and I figured it's time to come up with like a streamlined, tuned version of it and present it to you guys. So this list is basically close to something that pesss has given me at the end of last season. He has been climbing with it really well in like the top 10. Like I think he climbed to like rank 3 or 2 with it or something, and said he really liked it. Like one of the main things he liked and came up with that other people aren't playing but have been playing in the closed beta when it was better with Dawnwalker still, but probably should still be playing, is Predator's Instinct. Like, the card basically just provides additional removal past Permafrost, which is also very tempo efficient and has nice synergy with Cirso, because the other options are basically like Polymorph and Wasp. Wasp's like pretty inflexible. Permafrost is decent, but Polymorph is decent, but not very power efficient, and Predator's Instinct is just like a nice tempo swing while also killing most things due to having all these big guys. Alright, anyways, I changed a couple of things. Mainly, pesss was running Mystic Ascendance over Scouting Party, which I think is very wrong. Like once you have Obelisk in your deck, there's no way around Scouting Party. The card is just so good and like so much better than Ascendant, especially with Obelisk, but arguably even without Obelisk. But with Obelisk it's like not a competition. I mean, I get like Ascendant has nice synergy with the Predator's Instinct, because you know you can drop it on 7, play this 7th power, draw a card, Instinct the Ascendant and kill something with the 6/6, which is neat, but we're only running 2 Instincts and it's best with Cirso anyway, or with Titan, because then you can still block. So all in all, that's like not really an argument. Also, without Obelisk it doesn't get back Dawnwalker, and also we kind of have like a good amount of units to get back Dawnwalker anyway, so I don't think we really need it for that. And the other major change I made basically is he only had Titan as his 4-drop, and I think not running Displacer is just basically wrong. The card is so good and generating the tempo is incredible. Like if you have like a Dawnwalker or especially a False Prince on 3 and that like doesn't get killed immediately, following that up with a Praxis Displacer, especially on the play, and even more so with an Initiative of Descent, is like unbeatable. Like if you go Initiative of Descent into False Prince into Displacer, it basically wins you the game against most decks. And I think having draws that just win you the game, if you have them, is a really good thing to have in a deck, especially if all the pieces to it are good on their own. Since Praxis Displacer is good in all kinds of situations, it's also great against Dracano, which can be a problematic matchup with their weapons, especially with Blade, and having ways to deal with their weaponed up units in Displacer is really nice. And there's a lot of decks that have a lot of fairly high cost units. It's also really great against Burn, against the Impending Dooms and stuff, and Champions of Chaos, another matchup that can otherwise be a lot trickier. So yeah, the card I think is really great, and also having more than 4 drops that impact the board doesn't hurt either, because you don't always want to like drop your Obelisk on 4 because it just doesn't do anything to the board itself. You would need a lot of board for the pump from Obelisk being significant board impact, and in a lot of scenarios and matchups you just don't have it. Like the card is more of a like a later play when you have developed a proper board and not something that you want to play on curve turn 4 a lot of the time. So basically what I cut for the Displacers from pesss list, he had 2 Carnosaurs, which I felt are not necessary, and it's also a bit much top end basically. And they do a lot of the same thing and like get you less into situations where you even need Carnosaur, because they just let you be more tempo efficient and swingier and more aggressive, more proactive. They also have been pretty nice with party. Like a lot of the time you can go party and then follow it up with a Displacer to destabilize them even more and draw extra cards with party, which is great. And I'm not sure, like one other card that I cut was the for Cirso. I mean, Cirso is pretty good, but it's just like a fat guy, and like I said, the top end can be a bit clunky and a bit top heavy, and that's the card that I've found is most cuttable basically. And I think the other card was like the Force favorite, but I'm not sure. Like I think he might have had 3 favored to begin with, but I'm not sure. So yeah, let's talk about all the cards real quick. I mean, Initiator of the Sands, just one of the cards that you always see in this Elysian decks, especially with Obelisk. It makes Obelisk better, it lets you curve out better and more aggressively. As you can see, the deck doesn't really have any like actual 2-drops. So ramping into like all these 3-drops and 4-drops is really beneficial to the deck. So that's why that's there. Permafrost is just like the only really sort of good removal that Elysian has. It's also very efficient and very flexible, which is nice, and it's particularly good against one of the more challenging matchups in Stone Scar because it locks down the Impending Dooms and Champions of Chaos, which are both really annoying. Then the Instincts that I already mentioned as like additional cheap, versatile, sort of tempo efficient removal. Also nice synergy with Dawnwalker to get like a recurring 4/1 killer overwhelm, or with Cirso to kill anything without having it trigger their Entomb and even killing deadly units. Like for example, you can Predator's Instinct Cirso a Champion of Chaos without losing your Cirso, which is really nice. Since that's a card that is really annoying, and having extra ways to deal with it without taking a million damage while blocking it is really nice. Then we have like Friendly Wisp as our 2-drop. Like I think in this shell it's probably a bit better than Temple Scribe because it has a higher ceiling. Like the deck's pretty good at enabling it. Like you have the draw of like Friendly Wisp into False Prince, which is really brutal. Drawing like 2 cards off of your 2-drop of your Temple Scribe, and also the fact that it has flying is not irrelevant in this deck since it's a bit more aggressive than Shimmer Pack, and the Temple Scribe like card having flying is pretty nice for that. Also with like Obelisk. And then we have the usual Talir's favorite as like additional turn 2 plays to fix our power, and because they have great synergy with Obelisk. Honestly, I would like to have 4, I just don't know how to fit the 4th, and like the bare minimum is like 3 plus 4 Acolytes plus 4 Initiate and 25 power. Like Finkel, for example, has always ran in his Shimmer Pack. I'm usually a fan of the 4s, but I just couldn't find the space, and this deck has slightly lower requirements than Shimmer Pack, arguably, and Friendly Wisp, if it draws cards, draws more cards. So I figured, like with a slightly like lower curve and all those things, that it should be okay to only play 3, but optimally I would want 4. But yeah, there's only so much space. Then we have for Ember Acolyte, same thing, helps needed to fix our power drops and also to fix our colors, especially double Primal a lot of the time for Cirso and Crystallize, and also great synergy with Obelisk. Anything that's like a body and helps you get to 8 is great with Obelisk. Then we have Dawnwalker, the first of the aggressive units in the deck. Great synergy with Predator's Instinct, gets more annoying with Obelisk thanks to its recursion, and there's all the fatties in the deck to get it back occasionally, which is great. Some decks just can't really shut it down, and then it just kind of wears them down. And in other matchups it's just like a 4/1 overwhelm that doesn't come back because they silence it or have Steward of the Past or something like that. Or just like Permafrost it. But that's another thing that Praxis Displacer can do, which is nice. You can sometimes just like bounce your Permafrosted Dawnwalker, for example, to replay it. Or like even a unit that you use Predator's Instinct on with Killer to use it again. Or like rebuy a Friendly Wisp in a grindy game to draw extra cards. Or like return a Talir's Favored if you're in need of more power, like for example if you need to hit like the 8 power for Obelisk or the 6 power for Scouting Party, for example. False Prince is like the other aggressive and like the best 3-drop in the game, in the deck basically, since if the opponent doesn't have a way to punish it, it dominates the board like nothing else, and it's also like really annoying to block because it's so big and has overwhelm, so it's really good at like putting the opponent under a lot of pressure, and it also triggers Dawnwalker. It doesn't work with Predator's Instinct, which is unfortunate, but so keep that in mind, don't use Predator's Instinct on your False Princes, but other than that it's like a really nice 3-drop, and the deck also has enough things to text cards like Torch and Vara's Favor with like Dawnwalker, Friendly Wisp and Initiate before, basically, and even Ember Acolyte. Yeah, I think I said enough about Displacer. Card is super versatile, does so many things, generates tempo, rebuys stuff, kills Permafrost indirectly, and so on. And with an Obelisk at 8, it even returns Dawnwalker. Or simply returns a unit that can trigger Dawnwalker. Like for example, you can bounce your False Prince, replay the False Prince to get back a Dawnwalker at worst. There's a lot of things that Displacer can do in like stally, grindy, long games that are not obvious, that make it great outside of the tempo game. Like if you don't need it for tempo, there's plenty of like utility and value uses the card has too, which is why it's such a great card. Sandstorm Titan, not much needed to say about it. Best aggressive and defensive 4-drop in the game, and exactly what this deck is about. Efficient, beefy guys that can punch the opponent in the face as hard as possible, while also being able to like not get raised by more aggressive decks. For Obelisk, I think like Elysian Midrange doesn't necessarily have to be built with Obelisk and around Obelisk. There's ways to build it without, and good reasons to build it without, like for example all your units already being so beefy that they are usually the biggest thing on the board. But most people play it like that, and the card is definitely strong and allows you to play cards like Party and stuff. Like for example, if you would play an Elysian Midrange deck without Obelisk, you would not want to play Party probably. So since this version is with Obelisk, I think it's kind of like doesn't need much explanation what it does or what it's good for. It's basically just a decision whether or not you want to build the deck with. And the version that he gave me and has been doing was with. I don't have an opinion yet on a mid-rangey Elysian deck that is built in a different way without Obelisk, and this one definitely works, so that's why it's here. And there is 3 Cirsos, like I said. I cut one among others to make room for Displacer, simply to not get the top end too high and too clunky, and the card is pretty efficient. I mean, 5 power, 6/6 overwhelm is great. It's pretty hard to like to block and attack into, which is great. Like it really locks up the board and dominates the board nicely. But yeah, ultimately it's, aside from that, like a pretty vanilla 6/6 that trades 1 for 1 with a lot of cheap removal and is pretty unimpressive when silenced and so on. So it has its ups and downs, and I think it's like not outstandingly powerful in a way that you absolutely need for. And I mean, running too many 5+ drops in your deck definitely has its costs. And I think the Force Displacer, for example, is better than the Force Cirso, which is why I made the change. And we have 2 Crystallize. That card is just a powerhouse and one of the things that makes this deck work, because at some point the opponent might get you in a bit of a standoff and stall you out a bit, or is threatening to raise you. If you raise, you eventually just crystallize them and win the game. Card is really powerful, but it is situational. It's pretty bad when you're behind, but it's a great stall breaker and a great game winner, and like secures games when you're ahead, wins games when you're even, and just doesn't do that, and like can even win games when you're a bit behind. It's just pretty bad when you're far behind. Like, it's not a way to get back into a game when you're like way behind. But when you're just a bit behind, it can turn a losing game into an instant win. And it's also really great with the last card, with Scouting Party, because it guarantees you to draw 4 and deal a lot of damage to the opponent. And yeah, Scouting Party, that's like, together with Dawnwalker, our sweeper insurance, because it's really hard to beat this deck with sweepers between Dawnwalker, Scouting Party, and Obelisk. Which is part of why I am not running any backlashes in this deck, since I think it probably just doesn't need it. Like, cards like Harsh Roll and stuff are just not impressive against that deck usually. And a big reason for that is Scouting Party. You often have like a board of 2 or 3 units, then they Harsh Roll, then you just Scouting Party. If they don't have a second Harsh Roll, the game usually is still over for them, so that's how that usually works. And yeah, the card is just one of the best cards, like one of the top cards in the game, and one of the like deck defining and cards that are a reason to play Primal in a non-control deck, basically. Yeah, and last but not least, we have the typical Elysian Obelisk initiate power base of 8 time, 5 Primal, 8 banners, and 4 seal. So nothing special here. And yeah, I mean, the deck basically plays a bit like a more proactive, like beefy tempo-oriented Shimmer Pack without the like over-the-top combo finish, but with a more consistent and powerful early and mid game where you just curve out efficient units into efficient units and punch them with it, basically. I am not sure like how much worse, or if it is worse than Shimmer Pack. Actually, the deck arguably feels sort of better to me than when I play Shimmer Pack, because Shimmer Pack has like these consistency issues and has these draws that just don't do anything. And this deck has like a more like a higher density of good cards, of like impactful cards. So like the average power per card is like a lot better, but it doesn't have like the powerful synergies that Shimmer Pack has with Shimmer Pack. But it still has like the most of the best cards in Shimmer Pack other than Shimmer Pack, so it might easily just be like a more consistent approach to that game plan. I also basically was able to, I think, get along just fine without Stormlings, thanks to having better like 3-drops, since Stormlings is like a pretty underwhelming card, and it's nice not having to run it, because if you have Dawnwalker and False Prince, you should get away with not having links, and against aggressive decks with like the Permafrost and the Displacers, and curving beefy guy into beefy guy into beefy guy, you should usually make up for not having a links on turn 2, I think. So yeah, that's it for the deck list. Gonna jump into some rank games as usual, so stay tuned for the first half of the games in a moment. Thanks for watching.